Hello friends, welcome to the channel IT Simplified. In today's session, I'm here to talk about Windows 365, what it is, and how it stacks against some of the other similar services that Microsoft has to offer. Let's try to understand this with an example. So say you have an organization in which you have 50 users, and to do their daily work, these 50 users need a laptop or a desktop. So your IT team will provision these computers for them, load all the application, and ship that hardware to these respective users, right? Hardware can be anything from any of the organization, like for example, like a laptop. This from Dell, you can have from HP, Microsoft, Toshiba. It doesn't matter. They just need in hardware. But with this Windows 365, the major difference is that there is no hardware that needs to be shipped because this is a cloud PC. Everything resides in the cloud in form of a virtual machine, and you just need a browser to access this. It can be from any device, whether it's an iOS, Windows, Android. You just need to have an internet connectivity, and you'll be able to access your personalized PC, which has been assigned to you. One thing to remember, each user will have a one-to-one relationship. You cannot share your PC with any user in the organization. So you'll have a one-to-one relationship when it comes to user and the machine that has been provisioned. Now, when it comes to this Windows 365, there are two options that you can choose from. You have a business edition and you have a enterprise edition, and there is some fundamental difference between the two depending upon what is your organizational size. For example, for the business, the maximum user case is 300. So if you have an organization which is more than 300, then you need to go with an enterprise. That's one difference. From the licensing perspective, the enterprise option will require a Windows 10 Pro license. You need to have a endpoint manager in tune, and you also need to have an Azure AD Premium one. This is the prerequisite for it from the licensing perspective for the Enterprise Edition. And typically, if you have Enterprise Mobility Security Suite such as E3 or E5, then this already comes with this license already comes with that. Something to keep in mind. Now, both for business as well as enterprise, there are a couple of options in terms of what kind of compute you can have, and typically they are business, standard, and the premium. And they're nothing but what kind of compute power you want to assign to the users that you have in the organization. They can go from as low as one CPU with a 64 gig of storage to up to 512 gig of storage to higher RAM and higher CPUs, whatever you want to assign to them. Because I'm sure in your organization, there might be a user base which require maybe just basic compute. There may be some users which requires more compute power. Maybe if they're doing this for maybe graphic works or some heavy users that may require a little bit more higher RAM, even from the CPU perspective. So these are the two options, the business as well as the enterprise, which Windows 365 offers. Now, some of the other thing that come to my mind from the pricing perspective is the bandwidth cost. Now, as you know that with any cloud deployment, there is no cost associated when it comes to putting the data in. But if you are pulling the data out, what you call it egress, there is going to be a charge. And now when it comes to the business option, Microsoft going to limit this depending upon what machine size you're going to choose. They limit this between 12 gig to 70 gig. That is basically if you're trying to copy the data back onto your local machine. So say, for example, if I'm accessing that cloud PC from my this local device, and I'm trying to copy that back to my on-prem device, there is going to be limit. If you go more than 70 gig, then Microsoft going to restrict this. Something to keep in mind, right? Because generally when we are using our regular computer, we don't generally need to consider those costs. And these are all basically, this is a subscription that you pay every month. You have to pay for how long you want. Now, there might be a question arising in some of the people's mind is that there is also something, a very similar services, what you call it AVD or Azure Virtual Desktop, which used to be called Windows Virtual Desktop, and how it stack against that. Now, before I go that, actually, one thing just came to my mind. As I said that this Windows 365 has two options. You have the business and the enterprise. Now for enterprise, it is for a bigger organization, as I said, with more than 300 users. And you also have this requirement to have a domain controller. So you need to have a Windows Active Directory, because this is for a scenario in which you want to have a hybrid AD join. So organization which already have on-prem maybe environment, they already have Windows Active Directory, they want to have hybrid AD join. That option is unlocked with the enterprise option, which is not there in the business edition. And also something to point out now, that domain controller can be on-prem, can be in Azure already, but you cannot use Azure Active Directory Domain Services, which is a platform as a service offering from the domain perspective, domain services. So it has to be either on a virtual machine, that domain controller in Azure, or it can be in the cloud. So going back to maybe comparing Windows 365, this cloud PC that Microsoft has introduced, with Azure Virtual Desktop, because both of them, they are basically assigning computers to their user base. So one difference I can tell you straight away is that, as I said, that for Windows 365, you have one-to-one relationship. So every user will be assigned a specific computer. But in AVD, you have this option of deploying these resources in a pooled environment. Now, take an example which I took initially. So if you have 50 users, you don't have to, if you want, you can assign 50 maybe machines to them. You also have this option of maybe deploying 10 machines, and those 10 machines will be shared among 50 users, which is not the case, or which is not the option which is available in Windows 365, because as I said, that you need to have a one-to-one relationship. Now, that's the one difference I can tell you straight away, difference between people choosing between AVD and Windows 365. Another difference is because everything is managed by Microsoft for you. You don't have the admin access from the VM perspective. So if you want to have a granular control on the VM from the administrative perspective, that option is not going to be there in Windows 365, but that you still have those admin access on the Azure Virtual Desktop. Now, again, just talking about sharing the resources, as I said, that option is there in AVD, so you can use maybe FS Logic. So people who are already using AVD, they're familiar with this FS Logic, so user profile. So as users, they jump from one machine to another, their settings and everything is taken with them. So that option obviously is there within AVD, and that doesn't apply to Windows 365. But the main idea behind this Windows 365 option is that when we talk about Azure, it's all based on compute. The price is based on what services you're using, what is the compute cost going to be. But with Windows 365, typically it's going to be a fixed cost, other than the outbound, the egress charges, which I talked about, which is generally very minimal. It's not that going to have much of an impact. So if you are, want to be in that kind of category in which you want to have a fixed cost basically at the end of the month, Windows 365 is going to be a good option for you. That is the major, roadblock when I talk to most of my customers, is that because generally cloud, the way it is, that it's all based on consumption, and people sometimes they don't like the fluctuations. So that maybe will be attractive option for those customer base or organizational base. Other thing that comes to my mind is that you need to do due diligence on your side, which option to choose from, because there are going to be certain things, right? Because it's going to be managed by Microsoft. So you can compare this with something other Microsoft 365 services you might be already using, like Exchange Online, SharePoint, on OneDrive. Now, what happens if that users to which this Windows 365 or this cloud PC has been assigned? What happens to the data? Who is going to back up the data? With the experience that we know, that talking from the Microsoft 365 services, is that it's your responsibility for data protection. They will make sure that your data is or your services is highly available. Or what happens from the compliance perspective if you need to keep the data? How that's going to play around with, still, because it's very new services, we still need to test. At least I have not tested this because I was not able to find the option of trying this out. But I'm sure that we'll need to have some third-party options to make sure that data is protected, and in case we have to keep this data from the compliance perspective for maybe 2 3 5 years, which most of the organization they need to do, what options are available. But definitely something to consider. It's a relatively new services, so there's a lot of confusion going on. I would definitely recommend go and test it out. I'm going to leave a link in the description box so that you can read about this, which gives you more information about what are the different option between business and the enterprise. I will leave that in the uh, description. So this was a quick summary of Windows 365. Hope you found this useful. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.